Okay, so today's episode is called The Untold Story of Jesse Clevenger. And this is going to be a fun video for several reasons. For some of you that read the book, The Legend of Clevenger's Lost Gold, I'll just hold it up here. The story is about a family that leaves Arizona, and Charlotte and Samuel Clevenger. They have an adopted daughter named Jessie. They leave Arizona on their way to Washington Territory, and just as they get to the northern border of Arizona, right by southern Utah, they are murdered. And what's interesting about this story is Samuel buries a bunch of money before he gets murdered. It's his entire life savings, and that life savings has never been found. And so what we're doing with the purpose of this book and these videos is to retrace the trail of the Clevengers, to learn more about them, to see, does this money really exist? Did they die? Did this story really take place? And kind of sift through the legends versus the facts. And so it is an amazing story, guys, and you will fall in love with it if you read it. And I would highly encourage you to go over to Amazon and purchase the book, The Legend of Clevenger's Lost Gold. So let's get started. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about Jessie. Now, Jessie is an interesting character in this story because she's young. It's not known whether or not she had a relationship with one of the hired hands, which is Frank Wilson, who ended up hanging for the crime in Prescott, Arizona. But let me back up and tell you the story real quick, and then we're going to dig in and learn a little bit about her, who she is, things that about her life that was not known until just recently when I did the research, and then uncover a little bit about where she went and what happened to her after these tragic events. So to dig in, give you a little bit of background on Jessie, is the Clevengers adopted Jessie, and at the time of the murder, she was around 14 years old, and she worked right beside the rest of the Clevengers, working on moving their horses and their belongings to the Washington Territory. They had quite a bit of belongings, a lot of horses and just different assets that they were either selling and or moving up to Washington Territory, and she worked side by side with the rest of the family helping. Now, Samuel Clevenger had a wife named Charlotte. Charlotte was sick and ill, and it is believed that Jessie was really there to help her mother out during the whole trip and to make sure her needs were taken care of. And so you picture this young girl, 14 years old, always taking care of her elderly mother. Jessie was adopted, so it was not her birth mother, but it was still her mother and her father. And as they made their way north, these two hired hands that were hired to help assist them moving their family belongings up to Washington Territory started discussing a plan potentially to either rob the Clevengers or do something that would probably not turn out so good. And Samuel Clevenger caught wind of this, and so he felt impressed to start hiding his money each night. And on the third night, after hiding it for 2 nights, he hid it that last night. He told Jessie where he hid it at, and then the next morning, he was brutally murdered by an axe by the two hired hands that was assisting them with their travels to Washington Territory. At the same time he was murdered, of course, his wife screams out. Jessie's there to witness all this, and she gets hit on the side of the head by the axe, and she too is pronounced dead. And anyhow, Jessie, in fear of her life, is probably begging for mercy at this point. We don't know, but for whatever reason, Frank Wilson and John Johnson, who were the two men that did this crime, decided to spare her life, and with the promise and commitment from her never to speak of the murders. And they took her up to Idaho, where she lived with Frank Wilson until he was apprehended and hauled back to Prescott and held accountable for the murders and eventually hung. Now, that's what happened with Jessie. So if you look at Jessie, it's interesting because let's first talk about her age. And then we're going to dig in and we're going to go through her age, her adoption, her kidnapping, a birth of her daughter, her marriage, an inheritance. That's right, I said inheritance. Her relocation, and then eventually her death. I'm going to kind of go through this quick, but it might paint a better picture for who this Jessie was and give you a little bit of background. Up until the point of this book being written, this is information that was not out there, guys, available for simple searches or things like that. I have been researching this book extensively, trying to put these pieces together, and it wasn't until just this last week that I was able to discover the information I'm going to share with you. So it's exciting information. It's new information. It's not in any of the other accounts related to this story. So hopefully you will enjoy it. So let's jump in and talk about who Jessie is. And let's start with her name. Up to this point, we knew that there was an adopted daughter. We assumed her name was Jessie, and her last name would have been Clevenger because she was adopted, right? And but without any additional proof to that, it was all assumptions at that point. But what we just discovered, which was really cool, which gives us a lot of really good information, is the Clevengers family on a census that was taken in 1880. This would have been 6 years before the murder. And I'll tell you where this was taken in just a few minutes, and that's part of this story as well, which is extremely fun. But if we scroll into here, you're going to see that right here it says Clevenger, S.C., and then you'll see Charlotte, the wife, and then you see Jessie, and her middle name is May. Isn't that awesome? So now we actually have a middle name for her, and it's Jessie May Clevenger. Now, if we move on over, you'll see at the time of 1880, her age was 7. So by looking at that, we can back into when her birth date was. And what's interesting over here is you'll see that she is actually from Missouri, right there. And her father and mother, Indiana and South Carolina. Pretty interesting stuff there. So the first thing that we want to identify is, of course, who Jessie was. Jessie, legal name, Jessie May Clevenger. So that was a new tidbit of information that helps to help us understand Jessie a little bit more. Now, we know her age. At the time of the murders, even though within the book and the different accounts, the newspapers, some say she was 14, some say she was 15, some people say she was 17. We know now that she was 14 years old at the time of the murders. So that's definite. Talk a little bit about the adoption. It's interesting because you will notice right here, let me see. Let me just move over. Yep. So the adoption, she was in Missouri, and of course her father and mother, Virginia and South Carolina. So I haven't found out much about her adoption yet. I found some references to a Jessie May but making that definite tie as to how she ended up in their family. Was it a brother's daughter or sister's daughter, or did somebody die and they adopted her, or was she simply adopted to help out the Clevengers with Charlotte being sick and all? But it's interesting because we don't quite know. Now my goal is to find that out. Now, we talked a little bit about the kidnapping. Now, after the kidnapping, apparently Jessie and and Frank Wilson had a relationship, and Jessie was pregnant. And shortly after the hanging of Frank Wilson, when he was hung for the crime of the murders, he was there hung in the gallows right there in Prescott at the old courthouse. Jessie gave birth to this daughter, and this young daughter lived up until about she was, I believe, 18 months old when she was adopted out to. She was placed up for adoption, and Mr. and Mrs. Vanderberg, who were recognized in the community as merchants in Stanton, Arizona, adopted this little girl. And then this little girl, I believe by age 3, had passed away. And I'm not too sure how this little girl passed away. But you have to think for a minute, why did Jessie place her daughter up for adoption? And then what happened directly after that, right? And so right at the point of placing this child up for adoption, she did something extremely interesting, and that is that she asked Jim Roberts, hold on real quick, but she did something pretty interesting. Right about the time of this adoption, she asked Jim Roberts to go and search for that missing money of the Clevengers. And up to this point, it's not talked about. They don't talk about it in the newspapers. They don't talk about it anywhere. It's the only thing that's ever referenced in the court hearings or the newspapers was this $500 that was missing, and that was the money that Clevengers carried on him. But as far as the missing money that had to do with his estate that he sold, his property and so forth, that money was never mentioned. And it wasn't even until this specific time period that Jessie seeks out some help and asks Jim to go get that money. And you think about this for a minute. Here she is. She has this daughter. Is she to the point to where she cannot take care of this daughter anymore? And she's so desperate that she reaches out to Jim to go and search for this money. Up to this point, she didn't want the money. Maybe she felt like the money was cursed, or her birth parents died over it, and it was just money that she didn't want anything to do with. She never told Frank Wilson about it or John Johnson, because they never went back and got it, and they never, in all their testimonies, ever talked about it. So it's like she kept the secret that her father committed her to all the way up until this very last moment, to where she was probably faced with a challenge in life to say, what do I do? And it's, I mean, here she has this daughter. It's possible that she can't take care of this poor little child, and places this child up for adoption only after Jim returns back and tells her that he could not find the missing money. And what a blow that was to Jessie. She was probably hoping that she could get that money, keep her daughter, and who knows what else, right? But the fact that right at that specific time in her life, she gets the news from Jim that he couldn't find the money, and she's left with no choice but to adopt that child out. And that right there just confirms to me how much that money was. She was anticipating that money to help her, and it in fact, she didn't get it. And some people say, well, did Jessie get the money? If Jessie would have gotten the money, she would have kept her daughter, and she didn't. She ended up placing that daughter up for adoption, most likely to give that child a better life than what she went through and had to deal with. And it was shortly after that adoption that she married a man named Joseph. And let's jump over to that real quick. I'm going to jump off this screen, and let me jump over here. So there's a man inside Prescott called Joseph Spear, and this is when she ends up marrying him. And so now we're moving in. We have her name, we have her age, we talked about her adoption, the fact she was kidnapped, she ends up getting pregnant. She has a daughter. This daughter, 18 months old, she places this daughter up for adoption, and then she goes off and gets married. Shortly after this period of time, that little daughter ended up dying. So she loses her little daughter in this process. But she does get married, and she marries Joseph Spear. And I'm going to just pull this up real quick, and I'll show you this. It says right here, Joe Spear and Jesse Clevenger. And this is confirmation, territory of Arizona, county of Yavapai. I hereby certify that I, Henry something, and it goes on, it says, precinct, county of Yavapai, did on the 3rd day of May, 1889, unite in marriage Joseph Spear and Jesse Clevenger at Prescott, Arizona. So she ends up marrying Joseph Spear. And this is where it gets real interesting, guys, because she doesn't stay in Prescott. She ups and leaves, and it is rumored that she goes to Colorado. And nobody up to this point in time in researching this over the last 130 years has answered the question, why Colorado? And I'm about to answer that for you and tell you why Colorado in the next couple of minutes. But before doing that, I done some research on this Joseph Spear, and it's very interesting what I found out. As a matter of fact, we'll just jump into it. So, why did Jessie go to Colorado? She adopts her child out and then heads to Colorado. It's rumored, some people say that she went back up to the Buckskin Mountains looking for the gold, but again, legends, I've never found a single documented reference to that anywhere. So the people that say that are people later on. Now, give you a little bit of background about this whole story is why have we never heard about this family and this treasure? Well, it wasn't until 1930 that Jim Roberts, who was the deputy sheriff at the time, that actually went out and looked for the treasure on behalf of Jessie. This is right about the time she was about to adopt out her child. He kept it all quiet. He never told anybody about it up until 1930 when he wrote a report about it with his brother, John Roberts, and they actually was putting it in as a piece of history. They were writing down history, and they shared the story of this and shared the account of Jessie asking him to go look for the gold. It wasn't up until this 1974, I believe, that this story came out, a brief, inaccurate account of this story that had a bunch of holes in it. It came out in a treasure magazine, and it's just a little blurb, and then that's about it. Nobody's ever written about it or went and looked at it or researched it to validate it. So the research I'm doing now is really some of the first research being done on this project ever since the events took place. Other than Swap, who's out there doing research as well, and he's been a big help to me in all of this as he's ping-ponged back and forth pictures and documents and answered questions. And I've been fortunate enough to give him information that he didn't have, and he was fortunate to give me information I didn't have. But between the two of us, we've made some good progress. But my goal now is to take it beyond where it's currently at, as far as the hearsay and what we believe, and actually factually get down to it. So this is new information that's never been shared or put out there that I'm going to share with you. The big question: why did Jessie go to Colorado? And I'm going to answer that with a simple answer of, it was because she was going to claim an inheritance. Oh, had you there, huh? Claim an inheritance, you say? This is at least what I believe, is that she already had existing property in Colorado that would belong to her father, Samuel Clevenger. And that property was up by Durango, Colorado. And I'm going to show you that property in a minute. And he had previously started homesteading it. And the goal was that he would file all the claims needed and develop the property to be able to get title to it. And that title was, in fact, issued. And it was this property that I believe Jesse was going to make a move with Joseph Spear and potentially go and claim and try to farm it. Joseph Spear is recognized in the census as a farmer, and it makes total sense that the two of them were going up there to get this family property potentially. And it's possible because they had homesteaded this location before going to Arizona that they may have even had family members living up there on that property and working that property. It was another asset of Samuel Clevenger. So I'm going to jump over now, and I'm going to show you that property. So let me jump over here. Okay, so let me pull this up real quick. Oh, and before I jump into that inheritance, just to kind of back up a little bit on the marriage, you'll need, see right here it says Spear, Clevenger in Prescott, May 3rd, 1889 by Judge H.W. Flowery, Joseph Spear to Ms. Jessie Clevenger, right there. All right, so I want to show you guys this inheritance. So it looks to me, from what I found, is there was a patent or a request to homestead land in Colorado, and this land was to go to Samuel C. Clevenger, as you can see. And it does have a description of the land here, and we're about to go look at it. But it's interesting because this was filed, and it looks like they filed the claim on the land, possibly developing it out to meet the requirements, and then they go to Arizona. So they actually moved to Arizona from Colorado and moved down there. And there was rumors that they did that because Charlotte was sick. And then from there, they were going to go up to Washington Territory. And why they were going to Washington Territory, we haven't answered. It could have been simply to deliver some horses and then return back to Colorado. We don't know, but we're learning about that more. But it's believed they were going to Washington Territory to set up a ranch up there. But they had this land in Colorado. So this was property that the Clevengers owned and worked. Now, what's interesting is this land deed or claim, patent, whatever they called it at the time, the homestead, was not actually finalized until 1888. So if you remember, the Clevengers died in 1886, and it wasn't until 1889 that Jesse gets married. So it's possible that in 88 this was finalized, and Jesse did not even get word of it until between 1888 and 1889. Sometime during that year, she learned about it, learned that it was granted to the Clevengers, and it's possible that she got married and she was heading to this as an inheritance. You'll notice that when they're given this land, it goes not just to him, but it goes and to his heirs and assigns forever, subject to any vested and accrued water rights for mining, agricultural. So it doesn't just go to him, but it goes to his family forever. So this would have been property that would have been able to be claimed by Jesse had she went back up to Colorado. This is new information, everybody. This has never been put out there. And so very, very interesting when you look at this, and it starts making total sense why she left Prescott to head to Colorado when she was married, and her husband, Joseph, was in fact labeled as a farmer. So it makes complete sense. Now, here's where the story might turn sad. And what I'm about to tell you is not 100% verified yet. It's assumed at this point and I'm working on verifying it. But in the 1910 census, United States Census, oh wait, before we get into that, you guys wanted to see this property. So let's go do that real quick. I'm going to open up Google Earth, and I've already have it in there. So over here is Flagstaff, right? This is Prescott right down here. Let me zoom in on this a bit so you guys can actually see it. But right over here is Prescott. Over here was the location they originally owned and lived at. Well, we don't know what they own there. We're still looking for the land deed. But this is where they left, and they went up through this area, and it was back in Prescott where the trial took place. Up here where it says Grand Canyon, and you see this little green strip of land up here, this is the Buckskin Mountains, and this is where they were murdered. Over here is Lee's Ferry, where they went through, and then 3 days after passing over Lee's Ferry and getting up in the Buckskin Mountains, on that third day, they were murdered. Jessie ends up back in Prescott, where the trial takes place. She has her child, places the child up for adoption, gets married, and then she leaves. And this time she heads all the way out to Colorado. Now, it's interesting because in Colorado, I'm going to show you their land, but before doing that, this is right out by Durango, Colorado. Right? That's Durango right there. See Durango? So right there's Durango, and over to the right, we've got the piece of land here. And this, my friends, this is Clevenger's land. This is the first time in history for 130 years that we've actually been able to open up and look at Clevenger's land. That's never been done up to this point. So we are witnessing this for the first time ever. We have identified actual physical land owned by the Clevengers. And this would have been the property that, if my assumptions are right, Jessie would have been going back to potentially claim as her own and possibly go up there and farm it and start a new life away from Prescott and away from the crimes and all the bad stuff that happens. Look at this. Isn't that a beautiful piece of land? You've got a river running through it. You've got a lake here. Awesome fields for farming. Just a beautiful piece of land. It's, I believe, right around 160 acres of land that Clevengers owned, Samuel owned. So he was actually working at the time he was in Arizona on getting the homestead rights to this land. And it was actually formally completed in 1886. And that's when Jessie was able to get married and then start heading that direction. So it's pretty cool, guys. Let's go zoom in. And today makes you wonder who the new owner of the land is. But we'll zoom in on here. And if you happen to see this video and you own this land, maybe you ought to comment on it. But this was the land of Samuel Clevenger. Pretty cool, huh? Now, let's go over here and then we'll zoom out, and then I'm going to kind of go to the end of this, which, as cool as this is, this story kind of has a bit of a sad ending. What happened to Jessie Clevenger? Well, that is the part that I still need to research, but I found some sad news today, and it was in the 1910 census in Colorado, and it actually listed Joseph Spear right there, and as a head of household, also widowed, which means that it is possible that Jessie has died by this point. by 1910. It could have even happened 10 years earlier. She wasn't found on the census from 1900, which I believe a lot of that census is lost, but it is an interesting thing to think about, that this young girl lost her birth parents potentially. We don't know, but let's assume that she lost her birth parents, was adopted out to a new parents. Those parents were murdered. Then she was kidnapped and taken hostage, where she was probably forced into a relationship potentially. We don't know. Maybe they willingly had a relationship, ended up getting pregnant. But either way, whether that was a willingly done and she actually had feelings for Wilson or not, she still had to watch the father of her child go through the process of being tried and convicted of the murders and then put to death. On top of that, she then has a child herself, that after 18 months, she's forced into adopting that child out. And for whatever reason, we believe she's probably feeling some pressure at this time. Otherwise, she would not have asked Jim to go look for the money. And then that child ends up dying. She ends up getting married and then moving out. And now, for whatever reason, she's gone off of the pages of history. Just a sad, sad ordeal when you reflect back on her life and all the trials and things she had to go through. So it's interesting where we're going to go with this. I don't know where we're going to go. I don't know if there's more information out there, but we're going to continue to look for Jessie and try and find out what happened to her. If in fact this census is the correct census, with Joseph Spear being on it as a widow individual, you're talking about by the time she was 40 years old, she's passed on. Now that could have happened 10 years earlier. Could have been before she turned 30. And so in closing, I just want to just give you a little bit of insight to Jessie, this amazing story of the Clevengers and just everything that took place, and to share with you some of the most recent findings associated with this story and just how cool these findings are, how neat it is to be able to look in the lives of this family and learn about them and have their stories finally told. They didn't leave children behind to tell their stories. They don't have descendants that can share the information. We have to go and painstakingly find this information and reconstruct their story. And yet their story is being told, and as if they're being written right out of the history. It's completely being retold. And we tell it in the book, The Legend of Clevenger's Lost Gold. This is a story about this family. It is a story about a treasure hunt, but during it, you learn about these people that are involved, and you learn about their lives and who they were and all that fun stuff. And so I invite you, if you haven't purchased the book, The Legend of Clevenger's Lost Gold, that you do so and read it. So as you watch these videos and as we discuss these topics, you have a good understanding of who we're talking about and why it's important and so forth. You might say, well, why not just go out and get the treasure? Why worry about all these little details? It's these little details that make the entire story take place and validate whether or not that treasure is out there. And with each piece, we're able to connect the dots and verify how much money was out there, what happened to the money, whether somebody went back afterwards and got it. Because if one of these people ended up retiring on the beaches of California, you might assume that they somehow got some money. But what we're finding in each one of these cases is that the individuals involved with this story didn't walk away rich. And chances are that money is still sitting out there buried, waiting for one of us to go out there and pick it up. So I invite you to learn as much as you can about it and meet me on the trails. Thank you very much.